my name is Armando Perez-Carreno, and welcome to the Web Talk Show. Today on the show, we have Mark Olson from LTO Ventures. Welcome, Mark. How are you today?
I'm just great. Thank you for having me, Armando.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I heard about LTO Ventures and everything you were doing, and I was amazed, like we discussed last time on our call. This is something I didn't know was a thing, and I would like to really explore what this really means and what people can get from it. So, can you give us a quick background on who you are, what your background is?
Wow. Okay. So, my if you go way back, I have a journalism degree, and so I was a journalist for years. That evolved into working for a company that did market development. So we worked with companies to develop markets for either the company itself or their products. So those two expertises were very beneficial to me. Coming out in 2008 or so, was working with a financial services company and wanted to do something different that had, real meaning and real impacts, particularly to take care of my daughter. At the time, I was an only parent. And so that's where the idea for LTO Ventures came around to provide a solution for her. And, it has grown uh, significantly since that day. Uh, the real turning point for us as a consulting entity was 2018, 2019, because of some changes at the federal level and the regulations regarding how you can use waiver funding to pay for individuals with disabilities to live in a home they're on. And so so we just kind of grew it from there.
Amazing. And for those who are listening, if someone were to read about LTO Ventures, we see the term IDD, and many of us won't necessarily know what that means. Could you elaborate on IDD, what it means, and what it actually is?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So really the proper umbrella term is developmental disabilities. And so developmental disabilities tend to be disabilities acquired at birth and that will persist through the lifetime of the individual. Now, that doesn't mean those things can't be treated, improved. Accommodations can make life significantly better for those individuals. Underneath that falls intellectual disability, and this is the definition at the Centers for at CDC, Center for Disease Control. So
Hmm.
that's the official government definition. Now, to be fair, also under the umbrella of developmental disabilities is autism, Down syndrome, ADHD, hearing loss, vision loss, things like that. Um, the industry, by and large, uses the term IDD or the acronym IDD to represent intellectual or developmental disabilities. That doesn't mean you can't have both, but we
Mm.
don't. It's not an automatic it's not automatically inclusive, if you will.
Oh.
And so, because intellectual or developmental disabilities is a mouthful, we just say IDD. Now, some people will will write it differently. It'll be I slash, yeah, I mean, it's
Hmm.
fine. I don't really care how you write it. Um, some of our projects prefer to only use the term developmental disabilities. That's fine. Some choose to include physical disabilities
Mm.
as part of the model that we develop for them. So, but that's just sort of the basic bucket. And if you're looking for a statistic, there's just under 8.5 million individuals with IDD in the US.
Wow, that's impressive. Is what happens when someone with IDD or developmental disabilities or intellectual disabilities grows up? Because I think we all envision when we think of it, oh, when they're kids and there's programs at school and at other places, right? But what happens when they grow up and they become adults?
There are a couple different buckets, and just for the purposes of clarification, IDD is not typically considered a mental health issue
Hmm.
like schizophrenia, bipolar, and a variety of other conditions. It's really there's sort of two separate buckets,
Hmm.
if you will. That doesn't mean that school system doesn't address both, and they do, and we're very familiar with that. But in general, you have the right under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act to go to get your free and appropriate public education at a public school until you are what we call 22 years minus a day, or age 21. Now, certain states address that differently insofar as if you start a school year at age 21, you can turn 22 but still finish that school year. Some
Hmm.
other states don't do that. If they know you're going to turn 22, they might not enroll you in that particular year. My daughter's birthday's in November, and so she was still 21 when her eligibility ended in the school system that we were part of. It's fine. The really important thing to consider with that is that you get a lot of free services through the
Hmm.
school system, particularly the public school system. And when you age out, whether it's 21 or 22, depending on your state, you lose all those services. And so we call that falling off the cliff.
That that's terrible. Why is that? Why that age?
Um, that's an excellent question. 18 is adulthood legally
Hmm.
across the United States. 21 is sort of another uh, representation of adulthood, I guess. I'm sure there's some historical reason for it that I could look up and figure out. Honestly, I don't know. I just work with what exists
Hmm.
in the regulations.
But it makes sense. So 21 being the age people can drink and make some other decisions and things like that. Perhaps that's like, well, okay, this was we need a limit wherever. There must be a reason, like you said. We'll find it out. Now, falling off a cliff sounds very bad. Um, and
It is.
I envision for parents and for kids, adults, or whoever's going through this phase, it's tough. What does one do after that, especially if you've been leaning into these services for so long?
Well, particularly in autism, we call it a spectrum.
Hmm.
But you can think of intellectual or developmental disability as a spectrum. And so, every individual is different.
Hmm.
They can range from completely medically, behaviorally dependent on professionals 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, or individuals that I know who are diagnosed with autism, for example, who drive, hold full-time jobs, make a very successful living. They marry, they have families, they have very successful careers. Um, One of my good friends that I worked with has a diagnosis of autism, and she is a recognized scientist contracted with the Department of Defense on a variety of very sophisticated issues, and her science is amazing. So it's a full range. Where a lot of Unfortunately, where a lot of individuals who age out of the school system end up is back on their parents' couch.
Mm.
Um, there is an incredible shortage of things for them to do during the day, particularly if they are more impacted by their disability. So just to be clear, a lot of people use the term high functioning or low functioning for adults with disabilities. I don't, because the individuals with disabilities themselves don't like that term.
Mm.
Um, I mean, what does it mean? All right.
Right.
I know an individual who's a nationally regarded public speaker who, if he hears a wrong sound or has a bad moment, will go into a full-blown panic attack and meltdown in a public place, right?
Hmm.
Is he high functioning or low functioning, right? So
Mm.
we use the term more or less impacted, or require more or fewer supports.
Okay, that makes sense.
So, so both of my daughters require more supports. They are more impacted by their disabilities. Um, for them, in a lot of places, a day program, someplace you can go from 9 to 3 or 8 to 5, whatever, however the program is set up, may offer a variety of activities based in a facility. I don't necessarily like the term facility, but that's a fair term, or out in the community, or a blend of
Hmm.
those two. Individuals who are less impacted may be better able to work in a regular job, or in some sort of supported employment, right? Where they're working, they're making a wage, but they have supports around them to
Mm-hmm.
help them to work. Around here, it's very common to see individuals with disabilities working at our grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
Um, HEB
Mm-hmm.
in Texas is very, very supportive of individuals with disabilities, provides a lot of work opportunities for them. Um, but there are a variety of places that they may work. Of course, the big consideration there is if those individuals are receiving benefits
Mm-hmm.
like SSI, supplemental security income, or Medicaid supports, you can't really make very much money
Mm-hmm.
before you lose those. And so that's a really difficult trade-off for a lot of folks because nobody wants to lose the Medicaid,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's you tend to have more doctor needs, more perhaps more pharmaceutical needs, and that's what pays for it. So, um, but it's all it's a spectrum, it's a four-dimensional spectrum, if you will, right?
So to see if I get this clear, based on where they're more impacted or less impacted, they might need more care. And so during the day, this is for someone completely outside the space that's might listening to this. Sometimes we forget, like literally, it's like when you have kids, you can't leave them at home to go to work. You have to have a way for them to do something during the day and be looked after. Sometimes at even higher ages. So you talked about a shortage. So what does this mean in when people fall off the cliff, age out, there are not enough centers or places that can offer these sort of day programs or activities or support?
Yeah, there's not remotely enough.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example. So we did a survey a year ago here. So we're in Bernie, and we did a survey of families in our area, and I'll call it Southern Kendall County, where we reached out a little bit beyond Bernie area. And we had about 40 families who responded to our survey, and we said, what do you need during the day for your son or daughter? And there was a program that had about a dozen individuals in it that went from 9 to 3, 3 days a week. And what they came back and said is, we need 5 days a week. Like, I need to be able to drop them off before I go to work. I need them to be productive and engaged and learn something
Mm-hmm.
all day. And then I need to be able to pick them up at 5, right? When I get done with work, right? Because what you sort of were alluding to, particularly with individuals with higher support needs, is one of the spouses gives up a job
Mm-hmm.
or finds a way to work at home, right? Um, I work in an office. I also work out in the community. My wife trains AI systems, and so she is able to work at home to do it. But uh, her work day is definitely impacted when one or both of the girls are at home, because the distractions are too significant to be able to work. And so, that's the calculus that every family goes through, trying to figure this out. Day programs uh, there aren't enough of them. There aren't enough people willing to open. There are some excellent ones in this area that we know of. We're forming our own because we recognize the need. Um, but yeah, there's not enough. I mean, it's a business. And
Mm-hmm.
so you have to be able to run a business that is going to be sustainable. It's not just a hobby to get a bunch of kids together for, 6 hours a day. It's a real business. And there's real money out there that can help pay for it. But, there's, like with any business, there's startup costs and operational costs and all those good things that go into it. And you still have to make it work. Um, there was a push, oh gosh, I don't remember how many. I want to say back to maybe 2014. There was the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act was passed that has been really a driving force in trying to get individuals with disabilities into competitive integrated employment
Mm-hmm.
as the first and preferred outcome for how their support money is going to support them.
Hmm.
Um, but there are a lot of individuals who, uh, integrated employment is one thing. Competitive integrated employment is just, you know, kind of a bridge too far for them. And so, uh, there are a bunch of great nonprofits out there who are trying to create opportunities for that. Um, it used to be that your option was either a day program or what was called a sheltered workshop.
Okay.
Um, and a sheltered workshop was a place where you could go work. You made a specialized wage. Some people call it a sub minimum wage. It tended to be less than the minimum wage. It often involved repetitive piecework.
Hmm.
Um, but it was in an environment that uh, you could get the support you need. You were around individuals like yourself. Um, as with anything, some of those businesses ran very well, and the individuals who worked there loved their lives and they were perfectly happy. Money wasn't really an issue for them, and they just wanted, and then there were some that were not run very well. And so there has been a move to close sheltered workshops, um, to emphasize competitive integrated employment for individuals. That leaves a lot of individuals
Yeah.
uncovered and unserved or underserved. And so one of the things we're trying to do is fill that gap.
When we look at these day programs,
Mhm.
I'm trying not to make a big assumption here, but is it an IDD? Let's say someone is moderately affected, wherever that spectrum might be,
Sure.
that they're right there about to be in the part of the spectrum where they could work, go out in the world, etc. But they might just need a little more time, right? So let's
Mhm.
say right after that 22 year, maybe 2 more years or whatever, if they have access to a specific type of day program, they could just sort of get over that hump and get out there. Whereas some, they're completely in a different part of the spectrum. But am I understanding properly that perhaps these day programs not only keep them busy, but could bridge that little gap of getting them from having to stay practically forever being taken care of, or jump to now I can be doing something on my own?
Yeah, you're exactly on target with that. So, just as I mentioned that some sheltered workshops were good and some not so good, some day programs are good and some are not so good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, the ones that you look at that really look like parking lots for
Mm-hmm.
individuals, like drop them off, keep them fed, keep them happy, hand them back, rinse and repeat, right? I'm not a fan of that.
Mm-hmm.
Even for individuals who are significantly impacted. Now, I happen to know a place in Nevada that I've been friends with and helped to support for many, many years who deals with the most significantly impacted individuals. I mean, these are individuals who are in wheelchairs. They'll never not be in wheelchairs. They require feeding tubes. They are very, very significantly impacted. And from that standpoint, you're not going to be out in the community doing a bunch of things. But there are things that you can do that are more supportive and more engaging and more any individual, no matter their level of disability, wants to continue to grow, right? They
Mm-hmm.
just don't want to be fed and get appropriate sunlight and everybody wants to grow in their own way. Um, there are day programs is kind of a broad term,
Mm-hmm.
or dehabilitation is the other term for it. There are some who are really focused on growth of individuals. To your point, right? It's absolutely what we're going to be doing with ours. Um, I want to be out in the community 5 days a week. I want individuals to, not just going and having lunch at a restaurant or maybe, if the weather's bad, walking around a mall, but I want them in volunteer opportunities, learning skills. Our pipe dream down the road, like a phase 3 maybe, is to develop a microenterprise center with a bunch of little microenterprises in it that all do different things. And so, over the course of a day or over the course of a week, you might go into each one and do an hour or two in each one that has a completely different skill, a completely different outcome, if you will, and figure out where your affinity is. figure out where your skills are best adapted. You know, all with the notion of helping you to learn what you need to, you know, to live the most meaningful life that you can, however you want to define that, right? And you're right. There are a couple, you know, there's some individuals, they get to 22, maybe they need a couple of years. Maybe it's social skills, right?
Hmm.
They just need to improve their social skills. It might mean sort of understanding how you're supposed, you know, what it means to have a job and
Mm.
how to perform in a job, right? It's showing up on time, it's doing a particular kind of work. Um, some great training opportunities. There are funding streams available, you know, for this through states um, and through not other nonprofits. And so, yeah, those opportunities are there. Are there enough of them? No, you know, there just aren't. Um, um, there aren't. You know, sometimes it just comes down to money. But there's some really creative people out there right now, and if you look hard enough, if you research hard enough, as I do as part of my job, I find all these really amazing ideas and things that people are doing.
I really like the microenterprises idea. That concept, it works because everyone has something that makes them shine. I was talking just the other day. There's this individual who is just not socially what you would say like everybody else, but he's fantastic at programming, etc. And I get on the phone with him to ask him a question, and you get the type of response that you would get. However, once we start talking and get into the technical aspects, it's like he opens up completely. And this is a grown man, and it's just a different person completely when he's in his essence,
Hmm.
right? And so to your point of the micro enterprise, that's fantastic because there must be something that they really enjoy doing or they're really good at that specific type of thing. And just getting them going and exploring and seeing what that is might inspire them and get the brain activity going and get the muscles going and just leads to so many other things. And then the rest of them see that they're happy and then endorphin, everything, right? So that's great. Is that something that's being done
Yeah,
anywhere
I,
else?
I would love to tell you that I created that idea. I didn't. You know, I don't want to say necessarily I steal ideas. I learn from other people who are
Mm-hmm.
doing great things and then try to apply it. So there's a place called Extraordinary Ventures in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and that's where I first encountered that. And I know the founders of that, and so they took control of I think it was a bankrupt event center,
Mm-hmm.
and so their notion was they were going to read the rehabilitate, use it as a job placement place for individuals with autism, and so it was on one level. And they got that all cleaned up, and then they discovered on the next, so it's on a hillside, right? So you can't get to the side, the lower level from one side, you can get to it from the other. We're sort of where they had a parking lot. What they discovered was this really interesting space. If they cleaned out all the junk that was in there and a bunch of little rooms underneath, and they came up with the notion of multiple microenterprises, and they had a laundry service. And so, because Chapel Hill sits in between Duke and North Carolina universities, and there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of fraternities, so they came up with the notion of a laundry service that would go, you know, bring a big bag to or bags, you know, to each of the fraternities, and each, you know, any member that wanted to use their service put all their stuff in there. They went and cleaned it, and they brought it back to them, you know, washed, folded, packaged, hung up, you know, with the plastic over whatever it is, you know, like, and you paid them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, um, and that service scaled up really fast. They had a dog walking business.
Mm-hmm.
They had a business tending to maintaining cemeteries. That one didn't work out so well because that's just very physically intense, especially in certain times of the year. They had a candle making business, a letter shop. Oh gosh, I can't remember all the businesses there. And so they went to the universities, to the business schools, and went to pending graduates and said, I have
Mm-hmm.
an idea for you.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you skip the six-figure job that you're going to go to when you graduate from here and come over and run one of our micro enterprises for $38,000 a year, and create a business, right? Serving these individuals. And they had a line out the door. of people who wanted to do that. And so it's proven to be this really interesting model. Still challenged to make enough money to be completely sustainable, but it works and it's a great model. Um, so, our goal is to do something similar, except find the way to make it financially self-sustaining,
Mm-hmm.
like real businesses. And what would be really cool if we can do it is that a micro enterprise would grow to be so successful that it could leave and go set up,
Mm-hmm.
some other place in town on its own, like a real business would. So we would then
Mm-hmm.
become an incubator, right? And
Yes.
so I like this notion of being an incubator of businesses. Some won't, some will just
Mm-hmm.
stay there, but if we can find stuff that, that could outgrow our space, that'd be awesome.
That's
Um,
that's great. And also incubators work. Like you said, some programs go out, some don't. That's the way it works. And there's so much push here in San Antonio, close by, that yeah, I mean at the end of the day, if something works, there's gonna be people that are gonna get behind it.
Well, we have a regular business incubator here in Bernie called DOS Greenhouse
Mm-hmm.
that is very successful right now. They're full again. I think I know the woman who runs it, and the people who formed it. And it's been a very successful little venture. In fact, I think they're outgrowing their space. Um, yeah, you're right. Incubators do work.
And I really like the concept that they did over in Chapel Hill because it's genius to have it next to the universities because you have a demographic that cycles. So it's always the same demographic, but they go in and they go out and they go in and they go out. So you can have a very tight niche service that helps that demographic, that stage of life, and build these micro enterprises for stages. Because you're always going to have a pipeline of people in that stage and then
Well,
people in the
you can
other
do the same
stage.
thing in this area,
Yeah.
right? UT is not that far away.
Mm-hmm.
UTSA, A&M San Antonio, Texas State, right? There's plenty of university talent,
Mm-hmm.
close enough that we could tap into.
That's excellent. Talking about the day programs for which there are not enough,
Not enough, yeah.
who pays for these? So apart from donations and things like that, is if one were to want to create a business, like a day program, like someone creates a daycare or someone creates a whatever type of business, they're in it to make money and help people, but make money if it's a business. So who actually pays for if you are the parent of someone with IDD and you want them to go to a day program? Do you pay out of pocket? Is this insurance based? Is this donor based? How does that work in the business side of things?
Yeah. So I'll speak to Texas in particular. So
Mm-hmm.
Texas has a specific system. It'll apply in general to most of the other states. In 2022, Texas got rid of what we called dehabilitation. That's an act of the legislature, and they replaced it with something called individualized skills and socialization. Kind of a mouthful, but that's what we got today. Right? That is the day program structure, but it's specific to if you want to use Medicaid waiver funding to pay for your individual to participate in that program, then you have to follow that, right? So the most of the participants in an ISS, individualized skills and socialization program, are paying for that with their Medicaid waiver funds. Now, for anybody who doesn't know what a Medicaid waiver is, very quickly, Medicaid is a source of money for low-income individuals. There was a waiver, the whole concept of waiver programs originated probably 4 decades ago, 5 decades ago, in recognizing that if you waived certain requirements about Medicaid, that money could then serve individuals in ways that were complementary to just medical, right? And so waivers, there's a federal baseline for what you can and can't do, and then each state can customize that to serve a specific need in the state. In Texas, there's 7 waivers, 4 that really matter. Um, and they help pay for a variety of things, your ability to live in a residential setting or your participation in an ISS program. And so my daughters have the HCS waiver, Home and Community Services. That's the most robust waiver in Texas. And we use that funding to pay for their participation in the ISS program they go to. Now, there are some families who don't have that waiver. Texas is the worst in the country when it comes to availability of the waiver. There are 350,000 people on the wait list to get that funding. And if you go on the HCS list, it's a 20-year wait to be able to get it. Yeah, I know. I see that your shocked face. That's pretty much the shocked face of every parent who puts their name on the list. My girls both have that waiver, and we use it. But for families that don't, they private pay. And so now you don't have to form a day program as an ISS program. I could just go do one on my own, but I wouldn't be able to use the waiver funding. The participants wouldn't be able to use the funding. It'd be 100% private pay. The insurance doesn't pay for that. Um, now, whether you're on ISS or you're not, you're probably going to fundraise to support that because you're probably a nonprofit to run that program. So you do whatever it is you need to do, right? So you do galas or 5Ks or golf tournaments, or a friend of mine up in the Dallas area does a thing with a little rubber duck race. There's very creative fundraising things. And then you go and ask the families for a little help, and so yeah, just whatever you need to do. But it's a business. You still have to run it. You have to bring in more money than you spend, and that's nobody's getting rich off this. They're just not. The reimbursement rates are terrible, but you still have to run it as a business.
That was my next question. So is it similar to when some practices semi-attached to the medical/aesthetic space can decide to do insurance-based or cash-based, right? And the refund rates are terrible, and some prefer the cash, but then you have to market it like a business instead of getting. So it's similar in that sense that if you want to run it, you can either run it as a business and expect people to pay for it like they would pay for a daycare or any other program or a private school, or do it where you can have and use those waivers, but you then have to follow certain guidelines. Is that?
Yeah, no, you do. And I use the term reimbursement. So, typically an operator of a day program is paying individuals and they're submitting their claims to the state to being reimbursed for the money that they paid for the staff that work there based on, who the individuals who showed up and whatever the rate attached to them is as determined by the state. And but it is those rates are insufficient to cover. They just don't keep up with reality. And the reality is you can make $18 an hour at Bill Miller Barbecue after 3 months, as long as you don't, as long as you show up when you're supposed to. And $18 an hour is pretty competitive for a lot of individuals, you want to get anybody good to work for you. You're looking at $20 or $21, $22, $25 an hour. I guarantee you the reimbursement rates aren't enough to cover that. So you fundraise, you find clever ways to make that work. The same is true in housing for individuals. Reimbursement rate, the funding that supports individuals to be able to live as independently as possible in their residential setting is also insufficient. And so we're being very creative in our model for housing because I know the problem is there, right? And but it's difficult. It's just difficult.
I can imagine. So how is a housing program focused on adults with IDD different than a regular housing program? I'm sure it's hugely different.
Again, it comes down to the individual, right? Some individuals work fine in what we call scattered site home or apartment, right? Just a regular apartment complex. They get a regular apartment. If they don't drive, they know how to take via to get to work, or they're part of a carpool, or if they do require and have the funding for supports, through the waiver, for example, to live in that apartment, somebody comes and helps them, however much they need help. That individual may drive them to a job or
Mm.
to a program or to something else. Um, uh, and so it can range from, individuals with low support needs who are pretty independent to individuals with very high support needs who are completely dependent on, 24/7, 365 care, sometimes more than one-on-one, right? There are some individuals who require two-on-one, three-on-one, because their needs are so significant. So then you end up with specialized housing situations, permanent supportive housing that, um, uh, and there's all types across the state. So, the historically, if you go back before 1999, a lot of individuals were housed in institutions,
Mm.
very large buildings, very institutional, rigid timetables, rigid meal times, on and on. And the Olmsted Supreme Court decision in 1999 uh, required a deinstitutionalization. There was a
Mhm.
mandate to deinstitutionalize and move into home and community-based settings, um, as required by the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so you saw this proliferation of group homes.
Mhm.
Um, But if you stair step it down from institutions which tend to be larger and more medically or behaviorally focused, then your next level down, in very general terms, is what's called an intermediate care facility or an ICF,
Mhm.
which is a smaller setting um, that still may be medically or behaviorally focused. They tend to be the setting, they tend to provide their own staffing
Mhm.
for that particular setting. And then if you step it down further than that, then you sort of get to group homes that might be three or four unrelated adults with a house manager.
Mhm.
There's more independence, things like that. And then you can actually sort of the next one below that might be something called a host home,
Mhm.
where instead of my daughters living with my wife and me, they go to live with another family, and that family
Mhm.
gets paid to support them. Or the individuals might go live in their own scattered site home or apartment, right? So there's sort of all these levels. Texas has more institutions, I believe, than any other state in the country. They call them state supported living centers. There's 13 of them in the state.
Mhm.
Um, they have more ICFs or intermediate care facilities than I believe any other state in the country. They have 750 around the state. That was a number that kind of blew me away when I learned it. They've got more than 3,000 group homes. But the problem is the reimbursement rate to pay for the support staff to support individuals to live in group homes is $13 an hour.
Mm.
And you can't run a business like that. So in the last year, 250 of those group homes have closed because they can't continue to operate at that. We lobbied the legislature for more money. Um, what's emerged from all this is parents who just go, none of these things are good enough.
Mhm.
It's exactly the same place I came from, and I know a better way. I have a better idea in my head for what would be um, what my son or daughter would want, either because they're telling me or because I know them well enough. So, my daughters are fairly impacted. They wouldn't be able to tell me exactly what they want, but I spend enough time divining that from them, and I go, I think this is a setting in which you would thrive, but also be safe, right? And so there's been this proliferation of really amazing thinking across the country in developing what we call intentional communities.
Okay.
Um, and intentional communities are purposefully built to support individuals with IDD. They take all forms, right? Um, Now, interestingly, I had this idea for what I wanted for my daughter, and that was really the genesis of LTO Ventures. Um, and then I developed, I kind of scratched out a model for it. And then I kind of grew into the space and I thought I got kind of smart on it. And then I went and started visiting a bunch of places around the country because there's anything from farmsteads to multi-story apartment buildings to campus communities to, pretty much everything. And so there's more than 300 intentional communities operating around the country right now. There's more than 50 in development at any time. And we built a business at LTO Ventures in helping nonprofits build their intentional communities, right? And and so it's climbing into the brains of the board and the founders and going, what is your vision? Like, help me to actually see the vision. And then we help them make it happen because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to make it happen. But some really creative stuff, right? So right now we're working on, besides our own community, which I consider to be pretty innovative. For example, just one of the things that we do is we're the leading developer of home ownership opportunities for adults with IDD in the country. And so I'm a big believer in individuals owning their own home. For families to say buy the home, pay it down, deed it into their son or daughter's special need trust so that they have a financial asset, for when to draw down on if they need to when the parents aren't around anymore. But it also gives you some long-term control. So I mean, we have our own model and it's all on our website. We're working on a project in Houston that's going to be a 4-story apartment building on a school campus. Very oriented toward, we'll call it programming right now, very much thinking about how you continue to grow the individuals, their school. They've, these kids have come through their school and now this is the next step after, right? You age out. But they want them to continue to learn and to grow. I always think it would be great, if an individual gets into that kind of environment, grows enough that they go, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go to a scattered site home or apartment, or I want to go get married, or I want to go live, with my friend over here. I think that's a very cool outcome. A lot of parents are terrified of that idea, but that's all right. We're working on Jewish inspired projects in Wisconsin, because they're particularly for, Orthodox and Jewish families, there's some very specific requirements for that. And so there's all kinds of different projects. And Texas has a lot of them right now. They've got a lot of these communities already operating.
Is an intentional community tailored to the more affected or less affected? Like, is one community focused more on one side of the spectrum or the other, or are they sort of generalized to fit a big part of the spectrum?
Each one is different. Brookwood community outside of Houston, I know I've been there multiple times. I've met a lot of the residents who are there. A lot of them are significantly impacted and they need a more supportive, higher support ratio kind of environment. Daymark Living outside south of Dallas and Waxahachie are individuals who are far more independent, require much less support. My friend, 29 Acres outside of Dallas, my friend Deb Caudy developed that. She has individuals, so she's got 10 homes on 29 acres. And she serves or supports individuals with a very wide range of disabilities, from very significantly impacted to pretty independent. And so, each project is different. And it's kind of whatever you want to do. We want, in our project, which we call Autumn Hills Village, we want to support individuals across a range of disabilities. Because a lot of the intentional communities tend to focus on individuals with lower support needs because they're just easier. And you can make the numbers work a little bit easier. But my girls are pretty impacted. A lot of their friends are pretty impacted. They need a place, right? They need a place that is designed with them in mind, but is meant to be a place where they can grow and live, the lives that they want to live.
is there a parallel to adult daycare and assisted living centers for which there is a very large market cap, but mostly privately paid?
Yeah, that's funny that assisted living always comes up. Um, the thing about assisted living is depending on how you want to develop your intentional community, they may look similar, right? Operation. But the finances are completely reversed, right?
Mm.
So assisted living tends to be occupied by individuals who are seniors who've accumulated assets and wealth over their life. And then there's a pay structure, there's a fee structure that goes with that. And
Mm-hmm.
I won't get into all the different kinds of fee structures, but that's, you got money when you get in there.
Mm.
Individuals with disabilities tend to be in their 20s or 30s. Right? They haven't accumulated wealth. In fact, you're disincentivized from accumulating wealth because you lose your benefits, right? So that's why special needs trusts and ABLE accounts and things like that were developed, right? To be able to park money for individuals, but would not impact, their Medicaid or their SSI. Um, so the financial models are completely different.
Mm-hmm.
The service and support models might be similar, or they might be very different. Um, but I always get the question about assisted living when we're developing a new project someplace, because I get it. It's easy to walk down the street and maybe somebody's parents are already there. My father was in a memory care facility and assisted living. My grandmother was in a magnificent independent and assisted living place in Maryland. Um, you know, where she lived a very robust life until she required hospice. So, um, so it's kind of a yes and a no, I
Yeah, no,
guess.
but that's a
They are
perfect
similar, but
answer.
they're not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think we all sort of jump to that conclusion and say, wait, why is this a business? And this other one sort of needs more of a nonprofit type approach, but it makes complete sense what you just said because it's the age group and how those assets were created. And I think also to your point earlier, trying to incentivize people to learn skills and grow and grow in as a person, but in a way, and of course it requires loving and everything, that is not disincentivized by the state so that they can actually grow and not be lose part of the benefits, which is what happens with healthcare and all that, right? So you get support, but then you make money and you lose the support and now you can't afford
Yeah,
getting
I
it.
know. It's always about money. Yeah, it's always about money.
So what can people do to help if someone's listening to something like this and they're like, whoa, this sounds interesting. I have some assets, some time, some money, some whatever, and I want to support these types of projects. Where does one go to learn about projects like Autumn Hills Village or even the concept of investing in someone else's project to get it built? How does
Sure.
that work?
Yeah, well, obviously, I'm going to tell people to come to see us because I'd like to believe we're a national expert in this space. We have a model for something we want to do. But if you go to my blog, we do posts about different states and all the projects that are in those states. I might look at a particular project just individually at some point, or I might look at a funding model in a particular way or a piece of legislation to trigger that. So there's all kinds of things you can learn from that. As far as everybody's time, talent, and treasure, um, we love volunteers. Every project, every place I know needs volunteers. It's the greatest way you can help. Um, if you've got access to resources that can help, particularly new projects, um, that's always beneficial. And then there isn't a project I know that doesn't need money. And so, donating is, and, figure out kind of what you want to donate to. I want to donate more toward a day program, more toward housing, or toward, something else. Every single operator of an intentional community that I know will be more than happy to sit and explain to you how it works, what they need, understand sort of what your personal interest might be, um, and try to find some common ground for that. At the end of the day, we're all just trying to support these 8.5 million individuals with IDD around the country, and all of us can't build fast enough. Um, so Yeah. Any help we can get.
The numbers are staggering. This has been truly insightful, Mark. I didn't know a lot of the things that we talked about today, and it'll get my head thinking of new ways that people can grow and need support. I hope this helps other people that are listening also learn about what's going on with these communities, that they exist, and that there are so many of them, but at the same time there are so few of them, and that we need a lot more. So, Mark, where can people find you if they want to reach out?
Well, the easiest way is just our website, ltoventures.org.org. Everything is there. I put everything on there. Um, you could sign up for our newsletter. I try to get one out about once a month. I would love to tell you I'm perfect at that. I'm not. Um, you can follow us on Facebook, LTO Ventures. You can find LTO Ventures on Facebook. Um, I, I should put more there, but we're busy building stuff right now. So, but that's a great place to go. And if somebody really wants to have a conversation about anything, contact information is there. That's my number at the bottom. So it rings the phone right over here. I love having those conversations. I talk to families all the time. I talk to people who want to create projects all the time, and I love to hear their stories.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on, Mark. I hope we speak again soon. And for everyone who's listening, just visit ltoventures.org. I'll link it in the show notes. Thank you so much, Mark.
Armando, thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure.